2.5 decades after the destruction of the first Death Star in the year 25 ABY, it seemed as though the Star Wars galaxy may finally have achieved peace. A treaty between Grand Admiral Gilad Pellaeon of the Imperial Remnant and the New Republic's Chief of State, Ponk Gavrasim, had put an official end to the Galactic Civil War 6 years earlier. The New Republic now governed the vast majority of the galaxy, while Jedi Master Luke Skywalker worked to build a new Jedi Order as the restored guardians of peace and justice. But on the fringes of the galaxy, a new enemy was about to appear and push these institutions to their breaking point, while preying on millennia-old divisions. Welcome to Wizards and Warriors, where today we're examining the opening phases of one of the most brutal conflicts in galactic history, the Yuuzhan Vong War. The Yuuzhan Vong, a mysterious extragalactic species whose technology was entirely organic, had been scouting and making brief forays into the galaxy far, far away for decades, if not millennia. But the first signs of their arrival in force came on the fringes of the galaxy, at a facility called Exgal 4 on the planet Belkadan, where scientists, with the goal of discovering life outside the galaxy, noticed what seemed to be a massive asteroid from outside the galaxy approaching the planet Helska 4. In reality, this was no regular asteroid, but a 10-kilometer Yuuzhan Vong world ship at the vanguard of a much larger invasion force. A Yuuzhan Vong agent stationed at Exgal 4 named Yomin Ka, disguised by his Uglith masker, essentially a living mask able of fully altering a being's appearance, was able to convince the scientists on the station to delay their report of the asteroid to the rest of the galaxy, lest they embarrass themselves by being wrong about its extragalactic nature. This seemingly small accomplishment turned out to be all the Yuuzhan Vong needed in order to secure their arrival. The world ship, commanded by Prefect Daggara, landed on Helska 4 and deployed one of the key tools of Yuuzhan Vong's strategy, a war coordinator called a Yamosk, which could telepathically command all members of a Yuuzhan Vong force simultaneously. Once embedded in the surface of Helska, the Yamosk began evaluating the situation in the far-flung sector in which they had landed. This force, members of a specific group called the Praetorite Vong, needed to remain cautious. There were still 2 further world ships of the Praetorite Vong set to arrive, primarily carrying fighter craft and additional warriors. If the New Republic learned of the invasion before the defenses around Helska were sufficiently established, or before the whole fleet arrived, it could spell disaster for the entire invasion plan. This was made all the more important by the fact that the Praetorite Vong were acting without authorization, invading before the other Yuuzhan Vong forces were ready, in the hope of gaining more glory and favor in the eyes of their gods, particularly the Slayer god Yum-Yamka, by achieving early victories before their compatriots. While Daggara's forces gathered on Helska, the scientists on Belkadan decided to investigate the asteroid's impact. A small team, led by a scientist named Danny Kui, and not including Yomin Ka, took a ship directly to Helska, into the waiting arms of Prefect Daggara. The group was captured almost immediately by waiting Yuuzhan Vong warriors, warned by Ka of their approach. While most of the team was killed, Danny was held captive. The Yuuzhan Vong were a warrior culture, and Danny's bravery had impressed Ka, prompting him to inform Daggara that she deserved more respect than a summary execution. At this point, we must briefly rewind to discuss a third prong in the Yuuzhan Vong's invasion plan, which helps explain the importance of secrecy so far and the limited response from the New Republic. For years, if not decades, individual Yuuzhan Vong agents had infiltrated the galaxy to learn more about their targets or to sow unrest, as was the case with one particular agent cooperating with the Praetorite Vong, named Nomanor. Nomanor aimed to keep at least a portion of the New Republic's military and government distracted on the opposite side of the galaxy from Daggara's entrance vector, and so he fomented unrest in the Asarian system. He formed the Red Knights of Life on the planet Romamu, sister world to Asarian itself, and stoked the tensions which existed between the poor Romamul and the richer Asarians, who controlled the joint government of the world. The Red Knights claimed to act in Romamul's best interests, but Nomanor had also snuck precepts of Yuuzhan Vong religion, including a strong hatred of mechanical technology, into the cult. While these tensions normally couldn't result in significant violence, as neither planet had a substantial space navy, every 10 years the planets orbited close enough to each other that ground-based missiles could be fired between them, though so far this action had never been taken. Nomanor hoped to push this as far as possible, as the deployment on Helska lined up with this overlap. As such, one of the New Republic's newest ships, a battlecruiser called the Mediator, under the command of Admiral Akdul, was present to attempt to defuse the situation, while Leia Organa Solo was sent to the system to attempt to negotiate. Nomanor ensured the situation would escalate as much as possible. Leia, her daughter Jaina Solo, and Mara Jade Skywalker, Luke's wife, met with Nomanor. On top of finding him stubborn, they noticed they strangely could not detect him in the Force. When the negotiating team returned to Coruscant, Nomanor launched several nuclear weapons, carefully planned to ensure they avoided a path where the Mediator could intercept them, beginning a full-scale war between the two planets, distracting the New Republic, and devastating many major cities on Osarian. This would sadly be only one of many examples of various points of fracture within galactic society, which would be exploited to the fullest potential by the Yuuzhan Vong. While Dany left for Helska, Yomin Kar himself remained behind on Belkadan, where he had deployed a plague of dweebit beetles, which were used to devastate the ecology of the planet, converting the atmosphere with its emissions of carbon dioxide, methane and sulfur. While ruinous for local life, the destruction of Belkadan was not in and of itself the goal of the Yuuzhan Vong. As we mentioned, Yuuzhan Vong technology was entirely organic. On top of the living Uglith disguises, living creatures used for interstellar communication called Vilips, and a variety of other creatures used for every purpose imaginable, from war beasts to doorways, the Yuuzhan Vong fleet was made out of vessels grown from a material called Yorick coral. The changes to Belkadan would make it the ideal environment for growing new Yorick coral vessels. So, where the deployment of the Yamosk on Helska was done to make it into a forward base, Belkadan was essentially being made into a massive shipyard, or ship womb as it were. The scientists originally took this plague to be a storm. Dany had contacted the base to warn them about it on her way off the planet, but once this was all underway, Yomin Kar had already begun killing the remaining Exgal scientists at the facility one by one. Despite Kar's efforts to maintain secrecy, the Praetorite Vong were about to be discovered. A Jedi Master from Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order, named Kip Durran, had established a secret hyperspace monitoring buoy in the Varangi sector, neighbour to the Delonbian sector, where Helska and Belkadan were both located. This had been done as part of his squadron, the Dozen and Two Avengers' attempts to police smugglers in the area, a task which caused significant controversy within both the Jedi Order and the New Republic. Most Jedi acted independently at this point, with many following Durran's lead and taking a vigilante role. Some in the New Republic feared what individual Jedi could be capable of with no oversight while taking these offensive policing actions. Others simply felt the actions threatened their own financial status due to their alleged connections to smuggling activity. Luke had begun negotiations with the New Republic to potentially form a new Jedi Council, but this so far had not yielded much progress. We'll be revisiting these tensions between the New Republic and Jedi, and even within the Jedi Order itself, throughout this series. For our purposes now, this smuggler-hunting boy was able to detect Dany Kui's shuttle jumping from Belkadan to Helska. Listening to signals sent out from Belkadan, Durran was able to decipher only one word: storm. He dispatched a general call for someone to check Belkadan, while he and his squadron made way for Helska. The first skirmish between the New Republic and the Yuuzhan Vong was about to begin. The Dozen and Two Avengers, under Durran's command, arrived in the Helska system in a rolling wedge formation, quickly changing into an offset wedge with two members to Durran's right. The squadron was an eclectic mix of fighter types, commanded by Durran and his second-in-command, the only other Jedi in the squadron, named Miko Reglia. 5 of the squadron's 14 fighters were X-Wings of various models. 5 were fast, sleek A-Wing interceptors. 2 were aging Z-95 headhunters, and the final 2 were bulkier B-Wings. Within moments, they were set upon by what seemed to be dozens of multicolored asteroids. They quickly found out that they were in fact starfighters, firing cannons that appeared to be small volcanoes, specifically Yuuzhan Vong coral skippers, although the Dozen and Two Avengers didn't know what either of those things were quite yet. The significantly outnumbered Avengers engaged, successfully taking out several enemy combatants. But one of the B-Wings and Headhunters fell quickly, and any Yuuzhan Vong losses were soon replenished as reinforcements joined from the planet. Miko Reglia's fighter soon unexpectedly lost its shields, despite not having been hit by the enemy volcano cannons. Learning yet another capability of the Yuuzhan Vong, Their ships were propelled by gravity-manipulating creatures called Dovin Basils, able to lock onto and pull themselves towards gravity signatures. But these creatures could also strip shields from enemies with these gravity fields, and could even open small black holes to absorb enemy fire, thereby serving a triple purpose of propulsion, weapon and defense. The sheer weight of numbers and lack of information about their enemies quickly overwhelmed the Dozen and Two. Duran called for a retreat, but Mika's fighter crashed onto the surface of Helska, where he was taken captive. Only 2 members of the squadron, including Duran himself, were able to escape the system, though Lucas-like creatures called Gretchins had attached themselves to both fighters, attempting to eat through the hull. Duran managed to salvage his ship and limp back to civilization, while his final wingmate perished, ending the first battle of the Yuuzhan Vong War in a devastating loss, with the galaxy still entirely unaware of what was in store. On the relatively nearby world of Dubrillion, Luke Skywalker and his wife Mara Jade, Han and Leia Solo, and their children Jaina, Jason and Anakin were visiting Lando Calrissian's new business venture, mining asteroids. This visit served the dual purpose of allowing Luke to investigate the reports of Jedi hunting smugglers, which we know to have been Kip, in hopes of bridging the divide between the Jedi and the government of Bossk Filia, Chief of State of the New Republic. While on Dubrillion, Duran's message about Belkadan being in potential danger reached them. Luke and Mara decided to investigate Belkadan using Mara's ship Jade Saber, while Han, Chewbacca and Anakin were sent by Lando with a load of ore aboard the Falcon to Sernpidal. Part of Lando's operations on Dubrillion and its sister world, Dubrillion, involved an agreement with the New Republic to supply outlying worlds, which kept anyone from looking into his other potentially less than legitimate ventures. Sernpidal also happened to be in the Dubrillion sector, with Helska and Belkadan, where it was the most populous planet. Its population and traffic to and from the planet, in the Praetorite Vong's Yamosk's determination, the most likely place from which the Praetorite Vong invasion force would be discovered. As such, it was selected as the next major target. Nomenor and Dagara, communicating on Nomenor's flight away from Romamu, determined that a method must be chosen which would cause enough of a catastrophe to pull in a small portion of the New Republic's military, allowing the Praetorite Vong to pick off part of the enemy's forces without being clearly connected to an invasion and putting the advanced Yuuzhan Vong force at risk in a premature full-out battle with the entire New Republic Navy, potentially jeopardizing the rest of the incoming Yuuzhan Vong armada if the New Republic were fully alerted and allowed to prepare properly. The pair also discussed the capture of Miko Reglia, with Dagara planning to test the limits of his willpower in order to better understand the threat posed by the Jedi. Dagara began to put Miko and Danny through a series of tests, hoping to break the will of the Jedi and turn Danny to their side. Meanwhile, the plan to destroy Sernpidal was underway. When Chewbacca, Han and Anakin arrived on the planet to offload Lando's ore, they found the citizens talking about what they called the Goddess's arrival. One particularly helpful man then explained that one of the planet's moons, Dobido, had in fact been getting closer every hour at an increasing rate. Nobody on the planet, least of all the newly arrived heroes, knew that this was an ancient tactic of the extragalactic invaders hoping to destroy Sernpidal being put into action. Millennia ago, a civil war called the Kremlevian War had broken out between various Yuuzhan Vong domains in their home galaxy, essentially a name for a large clan with political or military ties. This long internecine conflict destroyed much of their galaxy. It was ended when a warlord named Yogand positioned a Dovin vassal on the planet Ixir, a stronghold of the enemy domain, the Steng. This Dovin vassal used its gravity manipulation to pull Ixir's moon into the planet, annihilating the planet and the entire Steng force, and cementing Yogand as both a legendary strategist and the first supreme overlord of all Yuuzhan Vong. This tactic fulfilled all of the criteria Dagara and Nomenor had in mind for Sernpidal's destruction. It would absolutely devastate the planet without giving away that it was part of an invasion, pulling in some elements of the New Republic fleet for relief efforts without causing a full alert. But before continuing the events on Sernpidal, we must first turn to Luke and Mara. They had travelled from Dubrillion to the Exgal facility in Belkadan, finding the ecosphere entirely changed, with noxious vapours from the Dweebit beetle's transformation emanating from the planet. Once in the facility with their droid R2-D2, Yomin Ka emerged to challenge them, calling R2 an abomination. We've briefly mentioned the Yuuzhan Vong's hatred of mechanical technology. Still, droids were an abomination above all others, something which the Yuuzhan Vong believed made a mockery of their pantheon of gods' handiwork in creating life. This was a key moment in learning what the galaxy was up against, as Yeoman Ka announced himself as the harbinger of doom for the galaxy, and Luke and Mara crucially learned that they could not sense this being in the Force either, much as she hadn't been able to sense Nominor. This would turn out to be the case with all Yuuzhan Vong and their technology, something which would confound the Jedi for much of the war. Mara was able to kill Ka in a grueling duel, before the pair of Jedi Masters intercepted a message from Ka's Vilip communication creature, where they learned 2 key words, Praetorite Vong. With all of this new information, including information on the Exgal scientists, the pair returned to Jade Saber and quickly laid in a course for the Helska system. On Sernpidal, Anakin, Han and Chewbacca began to organize evacuation efforts of the capital, Sernpidal City, using the Millennium Falcon and the handful of ships available on the planet and refusing to allow other ships to take off before being as full as possible. The approaching moon wreaked havoc with the planet's tides, washing away nearby coastal villages hours before impact. Despite having no knowledge of the Yuuzhan Vong, the trio deduced that this was no natural phenomenon, and even roughly narrowed down the location of the source of whatever was pulling on the moon. Accompanied by the old man who had originally given them information on the moon, who had turned out to be the mayor of Sernpidal, they were able to find the Dovin Basal embedded in the planet. The mayor heroically sacrificed himself to destroy the Dovin Basal with a thermal detonator, but it was too late to save the planet. Chewbacca had been left in the city to organize the evacuation effort, so with the gravity-manipulating creature dead, the pair returned to pick up Chewbacca and depart. Anakin joined Chewie in the final efforts to free more people caught in wreckage, trying to escape. But when making their own return to the Falcon, Anakin was clipped by debris, knocking him off balance into the roaring winds caused by the moon's approach. Chewbacca rescued the teen, returning him to the ship at the cost of his own chances of reaching the vessel. Anakin pulled the Falcon away despite Han's protests, knowing that if they returned for Chewbacca, it would only mean the deaths of everyone on board the Falcon as well. As the ship flew away, Chewbacca roared defiantly at the approaching moon, and before too long, neither he nor the planet was there anymore. Chewbacca's sacrifice did not mean the end of the conflict. Grutchins, like those which had attacked Durran, were coming for the escaping refugees from the planet. Despite his despair, Han took control of the situation, coordinating the rest of the evacuation, ordering that all ships remain in contact with 2 others and the convoy travel together, only as fast as the slowest ship. In the midst of the Grutchin attack, Han also received a distress call from Durran himself, who had travelled from the disaster at Helska to Sernpidal, which was the nearest major population centre. Han retrieved Kip, learning from the Jedi Master about the bugs they were fighting now, and the strange asteroid-like ships at Helska. Han instructed the convoy to make way for Lando's establishment on Dubrillion. Some ships lacked hyperdrive capabilities, requiring that they be towed, while a small number jumped ahead to warn Lando to activate his defenses. Meanwhile, Luke and Mara arrived aboard Jade Saber in the Helska system. Jade Saber was carrying Luke's X-Wing, which he took to investigate the system. He soon encountered the same swarm of Yuuzhan Vong coral skippers as Kip and the Dozenat 2 Avengers. After quickly redocking his X-Wing, Jade Saber, like the Millennium Falcon, made way for Dubrillion. While so far, events had not transpired in the favour of the denizens of the galaxy far, far away, they were quickly converging on Dubrillion with one thing they had lacked on Sernpidal, Helska and Belkadan: information. The Yuuzhan Vong force was quickly following, in hopes of keeping news of their invasion secret. But a success at Dubrillion could well prove to stem the bleeding long enough for the New Republic to mount a response. That will be the subject of our next episode. Please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking the bell to be notified of when that and other videos on the Wizards and Warriors channel are released. Don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.